recorded as well.
Yeah.
So in trouble now.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
The first thing we've kicked off with is me swearing. Fantastic. Welcome to the stream, everyone.
Can we see how many viewers we have?
Oh, someone's looping on themselves, or is that me?
There's one of me watching us too. A clone.
What is it? It's AltNet Sydney is the Twitch, or is it Sydney AltNet?
Sydney AltNet. As we just get started, waiting for things to happen. We were just talking about home setups and everything else before. Aaron was showing off his microphone.
Yeah. Well,
he's sitting in a cupboard by the looks of it.
Yeah, like proper home setup here with the
proper home setup. Yep.
Yeah, with the
you in the home bar.
Yeah,
I thought you'd be down in the cellar with the the tubs and everything else, like big drums of stuff. All the stainless steel going on down there.
Oh.
Crying babies.
Give me a minute.
Yeah. All right. Oh, and Aaron's just going to leave us with a shot of his distillery, which is cool.
All right, I can take him out briefly.
Oh, we're going to take it. Okay, yeah, do that.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, look, there's 3 of us now. It's amazing. All right, so we were mucking around with things before. I was showing off home setup stuff. Should I do that again?
Yeah.
Bit of fun. All right, here we go. I'm going to grab the camera.
Ouch.
All right, and I'm going to stick it up here on my forehead because then that's, oh, look. Hello. So here's my super awesome human Richard point of view version of my setup. I've got the old TV from like 1912 sitting over there, which is, I think, the year I was born. A little PS3 in the background, blue snowball, hello. Some crazy clowns there, and obviously the moderator view of what's going on, which is on that screen over there. I've got my personal laptop and the work laptop down the back, and a little docking station hiding in under there. And don't look at all my cables. All you OCD people are going to be horrified. I've got speakers sitting here, and you can see like a little blue light under there for something else. But yeah, that's kind of my home setup, which is pretty cool. It's nicer than a dining room table, I've got to admit.
Yeah, I think you got the prize for the most monitors.
Most monitors, and obviously all my other rubbish sitting around in various places. It's kind of fun. My little den. Oh, and there's me on a chair in a room, which is cool. And Ibby's yawning on camera. Wait, it's only 7 o'clock, man. What's going on?
Sorry, I was fasting, man. Sorry.
Fasting doesn't make you sleepy, does it?
It does, man. Like I just drank tea 30 minutes ago. I didn't drink coffee or anything from yesterday.
Well, so it got dark and it's quick food in the tummy, and then all the blood goes straight to the stomach, and I've fallen asleep.
True. No,
so we planned this well to have you talk then.
No, don't worry. I'm fine. I just get used to it. But if I slept, somebody just wake me up.
I don't know how we're going to do that, though. We can't go. We'll just take over at some point. We'll just randomly make up things. We'll just have whatever your presentation is. It's like lip syncing to someone else's content. Should be fine, right?
Yeah, not a problem.
No, we seem to have lost Aaron. Yeah.
He's in and out, dealing with whatever he's dealing with. I'm just going to drop a tweet out as well. Make sure everyone knows what's going on. Hey! Oh, Aaron's Yes, it is. Very impressive collection of booze. Nothing like a fake background. I'm sure that's exactly how Aaron's home is, given that he's broadcasting from a child's bedroom.
You want to show the reality briefly?
Yeah.
Fair.
Don't break
Me-
the illusion, man. You're ruining the fourth wall.
Yes. My bumblebee backpack. And wait. And Thomas the Tank
Wait.
Engine.
Yes. Nice.
I keep dropping out at the moment because I'm on the NBN, which means that there is only so much internet, and given that there is 4 people currently on the internet nationally, at least, it seems to be a little bit restricted. Yeah,
The not quite broadband network.
Oh yeah, so
there
there is
it is.
more of my lovely backdrop, which is the child's clothing and stuff like that. But yeah, I got this. It finally arrived the other day, which is a boom arm for my podcast.
Oh, and look, every time you move that arm, it starts crackling your microphone, which is great. And then he's dropped out again.
Oh,
Or he's just shorted out his desk and everything's on fire.
maybe
Did
it's
he pose? I can see him.
No, he's just gone and hung again.
all right. Maybe we can start. Actually, it looks like
All right. Aaron will come back at some point in time.
Yeah, I'll just take him
We
out.
don't know when.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. There he comes again.
Coming back.
He's here. He's not here. The Aaron that isn't Aaron.
Well, we're
All
here.
right. It is time. We should probably kick off.
Yeah. So welcome everyone.
This is like really frustrating.
Oh, sorry, Aaron. Have you stopped moving? Oh, no. All right.
Someone we just
welcome to the second virtual alt.net ever. And we have brought you alt.net unabated despite coronavirus, other disasters, fires, etc. We are still here for you. And we have a good lineup today with Aaron with questions on DDD Sydney and the wrapping up of DDD Sydney. And also Evie's going to give us a nice microservice talk on microservice front ends. So stay tuned. And of course, we have the ubiquitous 2 prizes of JetBrains licenses. There seemed to be some interest on Meetup earlier. So I'm going to collect 2 good questions that I'll ask at the end. And the first people to answer will get the free JetBrains license to any of their products. So make sure you listen up and stay till the end.
Absolutely. We should also just make sure, did everyone get their slice of pizza? We sent it out via mail. It should be in your mailbox at the moment. So you might want to go at the front, just check that it's there. Me personally, we're doing Taco Tuesday at home tonight, so I'll be having something else. But oh, hey, there we go. Drink responsibly.
Password.
His password.
Sorry, I'm just going to grab another one off the shelf behind me.
Nicely done.
Nice illusion there.
All right, we might kick off with Aaron then, since he's actually connected at the moment. We can't necessarily rely on that. So, Aaron, you just posted, I think, last week, was it? I think it was, maybe slightly the week before.
Yeah, it was I think the Monday after, I think it was Easter Monday, or it might have been the Tuesday after that, yeah.
Yeah, it might have been whenever it was, but around basically the future of DDD in Sydney and the approaches and some of the things that have been happening around that. And given, we obviously are focused on community and everything in this group, I thought it might be good just to hear from I was going to say the horse's mouth, but I don't really want to call you a horse because you take it as a compliment.
Ouch.
But the horse's mouth around the decision-making process, some of the challenges that have been happening over the recent times, and then obviously COVID and everything else. So over to you. And obviously, if you those on Twitch having a watch, feel free to ask questions as well.
Yeah. So for those of you who didn't catch the post, a week or so ago, we announced that we're essentially going to wrap up DDD Sydney in its current format. And for those of you who don't know what DDD Sydney is, feel free to tune out for like the next 5 minutes. Go search your mailbox for that slice of pizza that Richard has posted to you, and then ask a question of yourself about how he had your address.
It's the COVID app.
DDD Sydney is an event that I've been involved with on and off for about a decade now. I was involved with the original formation of it back in around 2010, 2011, but I was much more of a background player in that regards. There was someone else that was running it for the most part, and after a couple of years, they were just kind of burnt out and decided to step away from it. So then in kind of 2015, I was constantly asked by people about like what was happening with DDD Sydney, when were we going to see an event, because the likes of DDD Melbourne was still going very strong, DDD Brisbane was going very strong, DDD Perth had just started taking off and it was getting a lot of traction, and people were looking for that sort of like low-cost, community-focused conference here in Sydney. And knowing that I've been a speaker at a lot of DDD events, people were asking me what was happening. So along with Raf Haddad and Steve Gobold, we decided to restart DDD Sydney. We took over the brand ownership and stuff like that, but none of us had really any kind of conference organization experience. Like, we'd done speaking at conferences and stuff like that. We just like, oh yeah, we could totally run a conference. How hard could that be?
How hard can it be?
Easy.
Yeah, it was really
Said
quite
all
simple.
newbies ever.
Yeah. And like, but we set some like aggressive deadlines for the first time, and we turned it around in around about 6 weeks, ran the event, and it just like year on year we kept wanting to have that sort of momentum, because it was something that like the three of us were passionate about, and we knew that the community was passionate about it because, well, people actually wanted to come to the event, they wanted to submit talks to it and things like that. So, but we always struggled to really figure out precisely where we fit relative to what else was happening in Sydney. Like, Sydney has a really thriving tech scene, and across a really wide variety of languages, platforms, technology stacks, and all that sort of stuff. So we were always kind of this unusual one, because we weren't like a big showcase conference that people were going to spend $1,000 and attend, but we weren't your monthly user group where people were just going to kind of drop in and drop out. But after a couple of years, we thought we had some good momentum. We tried a couple of different things, and they'd all worked pretty well. And then last year, as we were doing all the planning on it, we wanted to experiment and try some new stuff. And we actually gave ourselves a really good lead time to setting up the event. But unfortunately, it was a struggle. Last year, we actually really, really struggled in terms of getting enough tickets sold, in terms of getting enough sponsors involved. And we didn't really have too much of a challenge in terms of getting people to submit talks. Like, that's something that we've always had a really strong showing with, and that speaks volumes to the kind of event that DDD Sydney is. But like, yeah, we just struggled in so many areas about running it, to the point where we were actually having a conversation as a committee, was last year actually going to go ahead? Because there was we were looking at potentially running at a loss, and while we're not trying to make a profit, or we're not in the business to make money, I personally can't fund this event, and neither could any of the other organizers, and that's not where we wanted to be. But you know, we managed to get enough people, enough tickets sold, enough sponsors on board. So we managed to make the event viable, but it really made us think about, where do we sit in the tech scene? So we went back and did a whole bunch of research and looked back at where we were. So we were running in, was it like August last year? I think it was. I should know, given that I was there.
It's a blur.
Oops, yeah. But in that kind of period of time it was like September, I think. Whenever, in that period of time from sort of late July through to around November, in Sydney alone, you're looking at 6 to 10 conferences, like what you would call conferences. Yep. So it's a really saturated market. Like, nearly every week you could be going to an event, like an actual conference event, and that puts you in a really difficult place to market. Like, how do you encourage people to come to your event versus like a serverless days, or versus name any other event that was happening? Like, how do we stand out differently when we're not focused on something specific? We're focused very broadly, and through like a variety of other reasons, some of the committee members were stepping down. I wanted to take more of a backseat role as well, because I've been doing it for a while, and there wasn't that much of a drive for DDD Sydney given the nature of where we were in the tech scene in Sydney, and those of us on the committee believe that we could actually achieve what we set out to achieve with DDD Sydney through the existing communities. Rather than being a competitor, why don't we be someone that's there, someone supporting them and stuff like that? So ultimately, it was a tough decision for us to make, that that we were going to essentially disband DDD Sydney. But at the same time, I think it's the right decision for where the event is. To a certain degree, we've achieved what we set out to achieve, to make the Sydney tech scene richer, to give people that hadn't had an opportunity to speak at an event the opportunity to do that, to give people that had never been to a conference a way to get into that part of the industry. And even as an attendee, they didn't have to be a speaker and things like that. So yeah, I wrote a post. I don't know if I can post it in the Twitch chat. I think I have to sign into Twitch to do that, or someone else can post it in there if they want.
I'll look it up while we're talking.
So like it was a hard decision for us to make.
Or someone else can post it if they're already on it. But yeah.
And like actually writing the post as well was like, it was really difficult. I spent a lot of time going over how I wanted it, because I didn't want it to come across as like accusational or pointing fingers. It's not like it was anyone's fault or anything like that. We just wanted to make sure that everyone understood where we were and why we came to this decision, and that don't cry because it's over, but be happy because you're a part of it, I guess is ultimately what we were hoping for. I'm just trying to sign into Twitch on my other machine.
Yeah, it's already.
And I've got 2F.
Getting MFA challenged while we're talking.
Oh yeah.
One of the phones is ringing somewhere.
No, so my phone's on one side and my laptop's on the other side, and then the camera's in the middle. It's like, there's stuff everywhere.
So since making the post, what's the feedback been like?
So a lot of really positive responses on social media. A lot of people shared like it was the first event that they'd ever had an opportunity to speak at, or it was the first conference they attended, and like they were really grateful for the fact that they'd had that opportunity. I haven't seen anything negative said to us about it. I have had people reach out saying, like, could we restart it and stuff like that? And right now, I don't think it's the right time. With what's going on in society at the moment with lockdowns and things like that, I don't think now is the right time to restart an event series. Maybe in 12, 18 months' time, rethink what it could look like. But I personally think that I can give more to communities than being yet another competitor to the communities that they have.
Cool. So for those so one of the challenges, I suppose, is what people have talked about, it's been great to have that first opportunity, the first whatever. How do we get people to do that now, to have that first experience? Because, if you've never spoken at a small event, you don't really get, when you submit to larger ones, you tend to get ignored, or you just don't submit because it's too daunting.
Yeah. So in Sydney, there's an annual event called, or it's a global event. There is a Sydney chapter of it called Global Diversity CFP Day, and that's it's a free event that people can come in and they learn how to submit to a conference. Like, what's it take to write an abstract? Like, what's the review process look like at events, and all those sorts of things. I want to get more involved in that kind of stuff. We did a bit of work with my team at Microsoft around supporting some of those globally, and I'd like to be better able to better support going forward there. In conjunction with that, I like to speak at meetups, as has been pointed out on the Twitch comments, but also. There's a lot of coding boot camps and stuff like that, which are, again, a great way to, you have to like speak, and whether that's because you're running a workshop or you're mentoring, like, even being a mentor at like a boot camp like Muses Code JS, you have to speak to people, and you are presenting to a degree because you're imparting your knowledge to someone else, even if it's only in a one-on-one situation. So yeah, I think that's the sorts of things that I would encourage people to look at ways to get involved. Definitely check out your local meetups and stuff like that, because they're a great way to do it. And if there's other things that people feel like they're lacking in the way that they can get into events and the way they can contribute to the tech communities that they're passionate about, send me a Twitter DM and I'm more than happy to chat to you about it.
Awesome. I just want to say from personal experience, thank you for running DDD Sydney for so many years, and for picking it up when others stepped away, because it was, right from the start, it was a good community event. It was people coming together, no real big pretentious presenters or anything like that going on, no massive venues. It was quite kind of the intimate conference of nerds dealing with nerds and just talking to each other around whatever mattered to them at the time. And yeah, it was great. So it'll be missed, but understand. So yeah, credit to you for everything you've done. And I'm sure that anyone else jumping online would pretty much say the same if they've been there as well.
Yeah. Well, that's my bit about DDD.
Sure.
Thanks for letting me share a bit about the journey that we went on and how we got to the decision, because it could seem like a bit of a short, like we just decided to terminate a conference, and it's definitely hard to kill an event. I can tell you that.
Not bad for a bartender apparently as well. So
Yeah, if anyone wants something, I'll just reach back and grab it off the shelf.
Yeah, there's pretty much no conferences in person. They've all been cancelled till December at least. So are you thinking you'd handed the mantle on to someone else in the 12 to 18 months?
In terms of DDD, I think for the time being, DDD is, at least in Sydney, is going to be done. I know that there is interest around online events and stuff like that. I'd like to work out how I can support events that want to do that. I keep going back to, I don't want to be another competitor to them. I want to make sure that I can support an event, because there's people that are just as passionate as I am about this, and they might be getting ready to run their first online event or run their first conference. And there's stuff that I can tell you that you should definitely not do, because we learned the hard way in a lot of areas.
Awesome. All right, James, shall we kick it across?
Yeah. Okay. So, Ivy, let me switch over to your presentation view.
Okay.
There we are.
Oh, look at that.
Ta-da.
Very orange.
Yeah, I'm out of colors, so I just decided to go orange.
That's all that was left in the basket.
All right. Well, I suppose introduce you. Yeah. So this is Ivy, and you can see here we're going to cover the microservices and the front end areas of this. Like, what are you going to do when you've got all these microservices and nothing to show what they're going to produce, or one big monolith? So over to you, Ivy.
Cool. Thanks. And thanks everybody for joining the meeting today. My name is Ibrahim. I work as a software architect at NTT, previously known as Dimension Data. And in today's session, I'll go through some techniques on how we can build a front end for our microservices applications. You may hear some noise, maybe as Richard already read, pa 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 ma ma ma. That would be my 1-year-old baby. That's not me anyway. So today's agenda will be what is a monolithic front end, and then we will jump into what is a micro front end and how micro front end solves all our problems. Then I'll go through one techniques of building micro front end using iframes. Another one will be web components. Then I'll go through a demo. One demo will be about web components itself. Second demo will be about how I can host an Angular component next to a React component, and each component can chat to each other and communicate inside the same page. After that, I'll go through some of the current experience I'm having at work, where I'm dealing with two micro front-end portals. And from my experience, I can see that one portal is using iframe, another one is using web components, what is the difference, how the onboarding process on each one is simpler, and there are some few tips and tricks the both websites are doing to be able to make developers' life easier. So I'm going to share that. Definitely, I left it at the end for you to stay, guys. And then eventually, I'll go through some non-technical complexities, which is most of geeks don't really consider before jumping into doing the like bleeding edge technology and doing the cool stuff, and then they really mess things up. And eventually, we'll have some questions and answers. Okay, so normally in the past, when people were building websites, what they were used to do is they used to package everything together into a same one package. So for example, if my website is consisting of multiple logic layers like orders, products, cart, and everything is combined into one deployable package. And this is the monolithic architecture. Back then, everything was easy, deployment was easy, collaboration between team members was also easy. But once the software started to scale, people started to want to find solution about this.
I have to ask: are those
Yep.
are those batteries instead of a database?
That's my Googling skill, man.
Carry on. Sorry, couldn't help it.
No worries. Yeah. Okay. So then people started to think about another solution like service-oriented architecture and microservices. And definitely people, once systems started to be more complicated, people started to suffer and started to scream and so on. And the life was not easy with microservices. You can see people, really struggling with microservices. But anyway, so once people started really to see a need into going like splitting the application, so people started to think about, let's decompose our application into autonomous small services. So if I took my previous application, I want to split it, as you can see, I can split it maybe into 6 small microservices. All of them collaborate together to achieve the end user functionality. So for example, I can go to a website like Amazon.com, and then I can do any action, and this action actually is hitting more than a very small application or a very small service. Each service could be written into its own programming language, like one microservice could be in Python, another one in C#, and also most of them already have its own database. So what is the benefits actually of doing that? So I'll go through this quickly. It is not the main topic of this session, but that gives us flexibility to have autonomous services. We can scale our team members across services in an easier way using our preferred programming language. Then we can have independent release cycle for each and every service itself. So I don't really have dependencies between services. And finally, also I can decouple my code base between each service. So for example, the auth service could be, the source code itself could be hosted into GitLab, and the C# could be hosted, for example, into Azure DevOps. I'm not saying that is something good or bad, but this is just like an example. But what most people actually were doing is they were building a microservices backend, but they had a monolithic front end. So all those services actually are coming together into one website, a single website. And this is started to, and this is actually on the front end world, this started to have the problem of what the monolithic architecture had in the backend. So what are actually the drawback of having everything coming together into one website? It's almost opposite to the pros of microservices, so probably you can predict it. It's really struggle to scale your team. Any changes in any code base, it requires deployment of the whole application. So for example, if I want to change something in the product's UI, actually I have to deploy a new application that could affect carts and so on. You have also mixed ownership of the code itself, because the code base is one, so everybody's contributing to the same place. If somebody wants maybe to update something in the menu, who's actually is responsible of doing that? If somebody wants to update something in the product's feature or component, who's actually is responsible of doing that? Eventually, and what most of geeks don't like is you may end up stuck with a single framework forever. So the people who started maybe AngularJS 6 or 7 years ago, actually probably they are still stuck in AngularJS, and they can't really upgrade to Angular or React or Vue or any one of the cool features, cool frameworks. So, and the solution, as I mentioned, for all of that, when it comes to monolithic front end, what we can do is to use the micro front end. So how actually can I do that is I'm applying the same architecture principle of the same microservice on the back end, but in this way, in this case, into the front end itself. So I could have, for example, can I have a product UI, order UI, and cart UI? All of them is totally dedicated, totally independent, autonomous component, and all of them actually are hosted into one application called the base app. And how I can actually, how can I like split my team into doing that? So what I'm doing is I'm having vertical slices. So for example, I could have a full stack team of people who knows front end and back end, and then I can have this as a product team. That team actually knows UI and knows back end. So I have the product feature itself. I have one team is responsible of this this feature. Same thing when it comes to orders. Same thing when it comes to cart. So actually, I could, if my application is really big, I could have a sort of product owner for the products feature. I could have another also product owner for the cart UI or the cart feature, and all of them just everybody's working independently. There is no much of dependency, and the dependency is just always using either APIs or maybe messages or something like that. And everybody also is really planning his release cycle, have his own feature plan, and so on. But actually, so the main idea here on how actually we can do that is, as I mentioned before, we have the base application. That normally base application has the menu, and then you started to host other components into that. Each one of those components is independent. Definitely, sometimes it's more complicated than what I'm presenting here. I'm just presenting the happy case, but you may end up, for example, into the product component on the left-hand side. You may have some components from the cart or from the orders, so you may end up with some nested components into each other. So what are actually the benefits of doing that? Almost same thing as the microservices benefits. You can have an end-to-end ownership of a vertical slice, as I mentioned before. So if I want to update something in the products, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to the product team, and then product team will actually change this. So I know how to talk to and where to go. Autonomous UI feature for deployment. For everything else, everything is totally autonomous. I can plan my deployment and release cycles, decoupled code base, and then most importantly is framework agnostic. Not most importantly, but that's what geeks normally like. So for example, I could have my products component built using Angular, orders built using React, and cart built using Vue, and the base application is built using vanilla JS or maybe jQuery if you like jQuery. But it is easy to talk, but hard to implement. So what actually?
Were you waiting for a reaction about the jQuery reference, by the way? You were hoping for Aaron to jump in and go, I love jQuery.
yeah, man, I know. Actually, I have a side project. I'm still using jQuery.
I think we have to end the call. Thanks very much.
Yep. Yeah, I know many people not big fan of jQuery, but I still.
Oh, you and most of the rest of them. I'm using it too, if that makes you feel better.
Okay, cool.
If you're just augmenting your site a little bit. All right.
Cool. Yep. So yeah, so getting back to what actually should we think about before implementing the micro frontend and how we can split our component, there is a few considerations I'll go through. Some of the stuff are like I saw many people struggling with, and I saw some practices we have at work where we can make sure that we're not really hitting the wall. One of them is how we can handle global variables, store, and local storage. Store here when I have maybe a store like if I'm using Redux or something like that. Global variables, definitely everybody knows global variable, or I wish. Then also version conflicts between dependencies. So as we mentioned, maybe my base application is using jQuery 1.6, but my cart component is using jQuery 2, and there are breaking changes between those libraries. So what is going to happen? I need to really think about that. Point number 3, which is also many geeks or many people who like coding more than thinking about the product itself may forget, is the governance of branding. So what I can do is my products could have different color, like my buttons are red everything have its own dedicated color, and maybe orders or cart has a different colors when it comes to my page, which is give a very bad experience to users. Also, user experience itself. So if I'm doing like all my components must stick with a specific flow when it comes to user experience. I'm not a great guy talking about user experience, but for example, if you have your products, you're adding stuff using navigation or using another way, maybe just expander, whatever way you're doing to add things, you need to follow the same thing in all components. For example, you cannot really have one page doing something and other one is doing something else, like maybe pop-ups. You find orders adding stuff using pop-ups and products adding stuff using normal form, which is really could be bad for a user experience. Finally, is how all those components can communicate, because normally, definitely, if anybody's just involved into HTML and CSS and JavaScript, definitely he will know that like your website is just talking together. It is not like what I'm presenting here, that I have a base application, products, orders, and cart, and that's it. So let's jump on how we can actually do that. So first way, which is many people will boo. Actually, first way we can do is first way. Yeah, first way is actually using iframes. I know many people was. I'm happy this is a virtual meeting, so people cannot throw anything at me.
That's all right. I think the grumpy old Glab is quite happy to support you at the moment.
Cool.
Aaron's a bit scared.
Yeah. So yeah, the first way I can do that, guys, actually it works. I tried it and it works. Yep. The first way is to use iframes. I know many people don't really like iframes, but the main idea here is I can have my base application, my menu, then I can have my each component is hosted within an iframe. Then I can have almost an autonomous feature or autonomous components that that can work. And each, for example, if I want to update something, I'll update something without affecting the other components. So there is one product we have at work that is using iframes, and it's working really, really good. But they are using iframe because they started this application really long time ago. They started, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, and iframes were the most dominating thing into the micro-frontend. Even I think the expression of micro-frontend was not there yet, but actually they thought about the idea and started to implement it. We will go later on to web components, which is a more modern way. So I'm not saying guys go use iframe, but we will get back to this because if somebody dropped now, he may get screwed. But anyway, yep. So getting back to the consideration, so I'm not going to do any demo about iframes because I'll assume that everybody knows what are iframes. Hopefully everybody knows.
You should see what's happening in chat at the moment.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm glad that I can see the chat. Yep. Okay. So those getting back to the consideration we have. So iframe provides JavaScript runtime isolation. So if I have my products component is using Angular, for example, and my orders component is using React, there will not be any problem in doing that. Plus, for example, if I can have different version of jQuery within different components, that will not cause an issue. So that's getting back to the main example. If my base application is using Angular 1.6 and products is using or orders using Angular 2, so that will not cause any issue because the runtime, JavaScript runtime, is totally isolated. Same thing to the CSS. So if I define any implicit style into products, orders, or cart, that will not affect the base application. Same thing whatever I'm doing in the base application does not affect really the HTML I have into my iframe. What about performance? Many people will like if you just go search the web, what about iframe performance? You'll find huge articles on iframe performance is bad, don't use it, and so on. But from my experience, I feel that the website is really good. Doesn't have a problem. Why is the reason with that? Because when people think about iframe, they actually think about hosting a whole application into an iframe. So for example, if we go back to the picture on your top right, on the top at your right hand, yeah, you'll see that I'm going to host a whole application into the products, a whole application into orders, carts, and if my page is consisting of maybe 20 or more components, so I'm hosting a full application. Actually, this is not that right, because normally I'm hosting a very small component, so that's a small chunk of code. So when it comes to processing and so on, that's not as if I'm hosting a very big application. Why I added some question marks? Because I don't have a number, so I cannot really say it's working perfectly or it's really bad or something. But from what my experience, it's just working fine, and like I never heard anybody complaining about the application performance. But also to mention that this application is not a consumer-facing tool. I mean, it is not something like Amazon where people or anybody can just log into it. Something else which is important is how the component communicates with each other. So if I decided to go with iframes, how can I make the products communicate with orders? The only way I could do this, or there's two ways to do this. One of them is actually communicate through the base application. So products has to go back to the base application, then base application has to communicate with orders, and so on. And this happens in any communication. And definitely if you have child, so you have to handle all those scenarios of communication. Some people also were suggesting that you can communicate using backend. So if I want to communicate with the product from products to orders, what I can do is actually communicate with the backend, and the backend communicate with like products backend communicate to the backend of orders backend, and then back to the UI, which is a very long route. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that could be an option.
Keeps you in a job, though.
Keeps you in a job, yeah. As long as there is no code review process. Yep, so that's something also you can do. I'm not recommending this. But anyway, something else about what about WebSockets and store? If I have a store and I want to make all components reading from a single store in the base application, and this is how you would think of it as well. So you have to host this store into the base application, and all components reach out back to the base application to get the data it needs. What about local storage? If you're hosting, like, if all your web components are hosted within the same, I mean, if all your iframes pointing to the same domain, then you should be able to access local storage without a problem. If you have different domains, then you need really to think about a solution for this. Yep, so that's for the iframe part. Second part is how to achieve this is actually, which is a more recent way, and I think maybe started 5 years ago. I don't really remember the date, but it's a recent way of handling this, which is using web components. So similar to the previous way of iframe, it's almost same thing. I have my base application, I have my menu, but instead of hosting an iframe, I'm hosting a web component. So I have my web components for products, same thing for orders and cart. But what actually are web components? So web components, so this is the definition. Hopefully I don't remember it, but you guys can read it. There is no problem. But basically, it's an API that allows you to encapsulate a certain component within a specific tag. This tag can expose a certain behavior. For example, a very famous example of a web component is the video control maybe in your browser. So if you go to the excuse me, the video control in your browser, there's not actually one element, HTML element. It's multiple elements, but it just encapsulated all of them into one tag, which is the video tag. So what actually components are consisting of? They are consisting of custom elements where you can encapsulate, create a custom element, like a custom tag. For example, you can say my tag, my dash tag, maybe component products component, for example. Also, you can utilize Shadow DOM, where you can have the HTML of Shadow DOM actually provide isolation for the HTML and CSS for your component itself. Then you can use something like HTML templates, where you can display the template of your custom element. And once you group all of that together, then you encapsulate everything and then import it. So you can provide a way for the other website to consume your web components. So you encapsulate everything into maybe a JavaScript file and host it in a server, and anybody then can consume your custom element or web component by just adding this tag into their HTML page, and then this tag will start behaving the way you want to do. So what's really cool about web component here is similar to the iframe, I can actually have framework agnostic. So I can have one component using Angular, another one using React, third one using Vue.js, and same base application using something else. We will get back to the consideration, but after the demo. So I'm still have some consideration, like what about the CSS, JavaScript isolation, and so on. But we will get to know them after a very quick demo about web components. So this is my desktop. Yep. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what I did is, so I did a very quick example of how I can create a custom element into using JavaScript. So what I have here is my HTML file, just very simple file, has some headers and some body and some explicit styles, then some tags, like I have a p tag, I have a span here, then I have something called hello world. So normally if the browser is just rendering this, it will go through this tag and it will not understand how to render this, but actually this will be rendered into something more complicated, similar to React or Angular. When you create sort of component within another component, then I'm just pointing to a JavaScript file called hello world. So here, what my web component is doing, I have to extend something called element. Then I have few function I have to implement, but eventually, so I'll just sneak peek into the end. You can see here that I'm creating a custom element, and then I'm defining what my tag would be, which is hello world. So all the logic I'm encapsulating here will actually go to the hello world tag. So then when this tag is being rendered, it will actually show all the logic and HTML I'm adding here into my class. So this class has, as you can see, I can actually pass properties. Like for example, I can pass properties from a parent component to this component, or from the main page itself. So here I'm defining what attributes in my component I need to observe. So in case something changed, I can get update that this property has been changed. Then I can have the connected callback, which is similar to ng-init if you're maybe using Angular. And then I have on attributed change, which is be called when an attribute has been changed. So for example, if my message has been changed by a different component, then I'm receiving this. Then I have a render function, which is a custom function. I'm almost calling in every callback. So what this is doing is I'm just getting an attribute of the message I have. Then I'm creating a shadow DOM, attaching my HTML to the shadow DOM, and then in my disconnect, I'm just calling another function. So if I just run this quickly, that's what I'm gonna see. So what actually the main purpose of this demo, please don't be confused. So what I wanted to show is I have a style here, a p style, right? So that should be applied on all p tags in my page, right? But if you go to my custom component, I have another p, which does not affected by the style in the parent page, which is the capability of our web component, that the CSS is isolated. So if I came back here to the page, I have my p tag in yellow, but actually this p tag within the component itself is still in black. It does not get affected by the style. Same thing.
Iggy?
Yep.
Question from chat at the moment. If you've got all these different micro front ends, do you recommend a separate repo for each micro aspect, or a mono repo, or what else have you done?
Yep. So currently at work we have different repos for each micro front end. Some people prefer. So it's really depends on the team. But what my team is doing is actually have a separate repo for each one.
So what's the trade-off you've got in terms of managing that complexity and not having things get too wild and out of control from a release perspective?
Yep. So a very good point. So okay, good point. So the website that has almost a repo per component is actually having a very big page, and this page has almost all the other modules within it. So we're using Angular. So from there you can have a main Angular module, and within that module you can have all your rest of all other components. So it is not really it's not really I have a different component. It's not really I'm having a different component here. Or for example, if my products page, I have products, then I have maybe products UI, products page, products button, all those kinds of stuff. Now all of that are hosted into one Angular module. That module gets exposed as a custom element. Okay, so that's number one. If you want to each one, if you want to expose a specific component by itself, for example, if I have a shared component within my products, for example, UI, then what I'm doing is we create a specific repo for this. So you'll find everything that is a root component, I would say, that that could be reused and shared. It has its own repo, and anything else that within the main component itself or the root component is part of the same component. That's okay. Remember, do I have to explain it again?
If anything comes through on chat, I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yep, and then I have here. Excuse me, guys. So I have here in my span, then I have here a span in red. So if I went back to my Angular stuff, I can see that I have a style span, then red, and that should actually affect the whole HTML. But here I have a span at the top, but it is not really affected by the red color. So if I went back here, so as you can see, this is only the red span where I can isolate the styles. What about the JavaScript? It's JavaScript. So if I went to the console, I have here a global message, but because it's just a JavaScript, then if I did console.log message, I actually will be able to see the message from the parent. So here JavaScript is not isolated, HTML is isolated. So that's one example. Second example is this is a website somebody did it online. So I just have to give credit for this guy. So he did effort to host an Angular and Angular and React components together. So there's an Angular component, there's a React component, and from here you can just say send communicate with, between the two components themselves.
So we're basically downloading both runtimes or engines or whatever, both frameworks.
Exactly. So what actually it is doing is, so I'll go through the Angular because I worked with Angular before. I didn't work with React when it comes to web components. So I have my wrapper page here, just like a normal HTML page, but eventually into my JavaScript, I'm creating an element called ng-element. ng-el, yeah, and another one called react-l. And here I have two projects. Those projects are actually hosted. So there's actually, I have a web server here running to publish only my JavaScript related code to my first component, my Angular component. Same thing for my React. So if I went back here to the UI and I did refresh, go to network and JavaScript, I can see that I have two main.js. Those two are loaded from those two running web servers. That one for Angular, one for React, and actually they are returning the relevant code to this. So for example, let's have a quick look onto the Angular module itself. So if I went to source here into application, and if I went to my Angular module, so when I'm defining this module, I can say this module actually is being exposed as a custom element. So I'm using Angular APIs to do this. So I have to use custom elements, and from there I need to say custom element, like use the syntax. Then I'm defining the HTML tag that will encapsulate all my logic, all my components here. So I have to define a module for that. Then this module will get loaded. Will get loaded here. So I'm not sure which one of them is Angular, but actually Angular will use the right APIs to do this. I think that's React one. Yep. So yeah, Angular will do the. Yep. Go on.
Yeah, so from the group, we've got, what's the debug experience like if I have a page with 3 Angular micros and 4 React and want to run it all locally?
Yeah, that's a very good question, but I'll get back to that maybe in
That's why we
exactly
have
5
multiple
minutes.
browsers, right?
No, yeah,
I knew there was a reason for Firefox.
no, I'll get back to that in exactly 5 minutes because we had a very bad experience with this. That we took a very tough decision, but I won't say it now. Yep. But yeah, but that's how actually it's working, and then everything is working fine. There is an issue. Both components can communicate with each other. So getting back to the Prezo, so what about the considerations, which is we will go through JavaScript runtime isolation. There is no, as you say, runtime isolation, and I mentioned that we have 2 portals. One of them is using web components. Another one was using iframes. So the iframes one, I'll get back to the iframes one maybe later in the next slide. But the web components one, actually, the guys struggled a bit to be able to handle multiple dependencies and multiple runtimes and multiple libraries together. So they decided that they will stick with Angular. So you can still have web components. So you have the features of being autonomous, have your own deployment system, or deployment deployment cycles, everything in relation like the. What about all the pros we mentioned about the web component? But when it comes to framework agnostic, they decided no, everybody will stick to a specific Angular version, because it was really hard for them to manage the dependencies between this guy's using React version this and this guy's using React version whatever. They decided everything will come together into Angular, and that's it, Angular and nothing else. Definitely, it was a tough decision, but definitely you have to think about release, tech debt, and all that kind of stuff. But that's actually what like during the journey, what they have reached out to. Stick with one framework. That was their approach to solve the issue. The iframe portal, what they were doing is the iframe portal, actually the only problem is actually the communication between the components, but debugging and everything else was like I didn't see many people complaining from the iframe as I saw many people complaining about the web components, ironically. But definitely I prefer to use web. If I'm starting something from scratch, probably I'll use web components, and I'll stick to a same framework for those kind of issues. So what about the CS isolation? Yes, as you saw, CSS is isolated, so there is no problem here. What about performance? I didn't add any numbers because I didn't have any, but definitely I would think of from theoretical point of view, web components will be faster than iframes. Why? Because the JavaScript runtime is not shared. In iframes, everything, like each iframe has its own JavaScript runtime, which is at an overhead, but in web components, actually it is not. What about components communication? So this is very simple. You can communicate using custom events, which is a native API into all modern browsers, or actually you can communicate using DOM communication, as we saw in the message attribute, that I can actually pass data to my component itself. What about WebSockets or store? You can have direct access to the WebSocket and store because the JavaScript runtime is shared. Local storage, same thing. You can have you can access your local storage directly. And most importantly, as I showed before, that you can host your web component independently from the application, and then the application is actually consuming your web component. So getting back to the portal stories, I mentioned before that one of them is using iframe, another one is using web components. So one of them is more recent than the other one. But if you ask me which one you prefer to work with, I'll say that I would prefer to work with the iframe one. Why? Not because I hate web components. I believe actually it is the future. As I mentioned before, I would think that if I'm starting something from scratch, I'll use the web component one. But the iframe portal, because it's been there for some time, and I think the team has grown to be very mature when it comes to handle onboarding of the new developers. So what they did is they have a production and online and sort of development environment for developers, where they can, if they want to add something very quickly on UI, you can go there, just add HTML and JavaScript into a component. So they create their own framework that can handle all of that. Then you can reach it directly. So you don't really have to download all the microservices in your device, in your in your laptop local machine, and run everything, see if everything is working. Actually, this portal to work locally, it requires around maybe 20 steps to be able to set up the local development environment. But what they did is they provided this online development environment where anybody can just go there, try their stuff quickly, and then there wasn't any problem. On the other hand, the web component portal, you had to had almost all the development environment locally. So to be able to onboard a new developer or something, that actually was taking ages. So developers, especially like fresh developers and so on, they used to really struggle to get started with everything. They have to understand what is GraphQL. This is running on Kubernetes, so I have to have my Kubernetes deployment. So they need to understand what is Kubernetes. That is not just like going through things and everything will be good. Yeah, so that's were two main experience, two different experiences I had with iframes and web components. So yeah, onboarding is really a big part of this, and actually it was a very big investment from the iframe team to build this framework and this the feature where anybody can start doing working online. So that's actually something good they did, but actually it took a long time. On the other hand, it was really struggle for us just getting starting with the second portal, which is actually was using a sort of a recent way of doing the work, which is using components instead of iframes. As I mentioned before, that the second portal, also the guys decided that they will stick with a specific version of Angular and specific version of all dependencies. That they don't really have to struggle with this component is using this version and this component is using a different version, and there is a weird JavaScript error in the browser that we don't really know how to solve. What also they did, they created a specific library, custom CSS library, or something like Bootstrap, but only for website. So there is a link embedded in the website. Anybody can embed into their application, or anybody can consume, and that made the styles and user experience almost the same. So if you want to create a pop-up, there is a way how you can create a pop-up. It is not really Bootstrap, so I think maybe they did some stuff on top of Bootstrap, but it was a bit different with the portal experience itself, which was really good. Yeah, so that was something else also the guys did to be able to overcome the styling guidelines problems and the user experience. Yeah, so that's mainly the two portal stories. So okay, so any questions before I jump to non-technical complexities?
Just scrolling back through some questions from earlier. Does the team, with the onboarding you were mentioning for the newer one, that there were challenges, how much of that was from basically having all the micro repos and going, where the hell do I get my code from to run things locally? And with that as well, was there also, how do I do a pull request that impacts multiple components and try to coordinate a single pull request across 40 different repos, or even 2, for example?
Yeah, very good question.
You're smiling.
Are we recording?
Of course we are. No, we're even better. We're streaming this, baby. So
okay, so I don't want to get fired, guys. But
cool.
Actually,
next question then.
Yeah. No. Okay. No. So I remember one of the guys was working on the second portal. It took them 1 month to get the stuff working locally. Just 1 month to get started with.
Sorry, you said 1 month.
1 month to just get the development environment working, because the documentation was not up to date. So they had to depend, because so where we work, it's like we were working in different time zones and so on. So it took them actually a huge amount of time to be able to get started with other guys who's actually maintaining the main the wrapper and the framework of the portal itself. And this stuff is working. The other guys has work pressure to complete other work, so the sync between everything was not really great. So it take ages to be able for them to get onboarded, which is one of the worst experience anybody could have, to be underutilized for a long time. Okay, so getting back to affecting pull requests and so on.
Incoming! Hello! Hey, awesome.
Okay.
Looks just like the postman.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, for example, to contribute to multiple things, now you have to create a pull request for each repo, and there is a release cycle happening every few weeks that guys were deploying this and that. It is not like a CI/CD where you just go there, deploy everything, and everything will work out of the box. So it wasn't really a fully continuous deployment release cycle. No, somebody has to do regression. Somebody has to check, make sure everything is working fine without a problem. Then somebody just click the button. Let's deploy those changes. Which is also
you're going to have PRs where one PR is rejected and one PR is successful. So you get a partial deployment of something going to production.
So no, that's getting back to the testing and that's why regression was really tough. That's why a manual deployment was there. There wasn't a concept of continuous deployment. So it was everything go there, then somebody click the button, release.
Which would be basically a code freeze kind of approach to make sure everything was in, and then Lord Teaspoon, you've got issues with Blazor, dude. I don't know what's going on in your head at the moment, but you want to put a Blazor runtime in as a micro front end.
Good question. So honestly, I wouldn't use Blazor unless I have a full team of C# developers that don't know HTML and JavaScript. So this is the only case I would use Blazor. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying I think to be able to use Blazor, you will sacrifice all of the other good things in JavaScript. That's why I would prefer starting something from scratch. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'll use Blazor, honestly, but practically, theoretically it should work. I didn't do it before, but okay, now it will work if Blazor also supports custom elements. So this is the main thing. For example, this is actually a very good question. Okay.
Again, you got to see the chat going on. It's pretty funny. All right. So, different question. With all the different micro front-end components, how are they getting consumed by others? Is it as npm packages published individually, or is it literally as bring in source from a build repo, build something artifact?
No. The guys are doing npm packages and deploy, and the iframe portals. They had hosting, so the portal itself was had the ability to host HTML and JavaScript and so on. So you would compile things by your hand and put it there, then it will work. It's a manual way, but some people were doing that. And the web components portal, no, they had npm. You have to follow the standard way of publishing. I want to say something in relation to Blazor question. Okay, so what I did show in my demo here is that Angular supporting web components or custom elements. So what I did is I just developed some code into Angular, then I used Angular API. Then everything in the module itself was created as a custom element. Same thing in React. I was able to expose my React code as a custom element. Same thing I would do with Vue, but not all libraries can support custom elements. So you may, so for example, if I use jQuery, for example, I want to do my custom components using jQuery, then jQuery may not have the ability to support custom elements. So then I have to write my custom elements from scratch. So if Blazor is supporting custom elements, then you'll be able to host it. So getting back here, So if, for example, going back to the Angular, so my Angular, you saw that I have l.ng, right? So that's a custom element. So if I cannot really do this using Blazor, this will not work. But definitely most of modern frameworks already supporting this. So I would believe they may support custom elements in Blazor. Okay, so non-technical complexities, or did we have any questions?
Yeah. Carry on. No, there's more questions coming in, but let's keep going.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to non-technical complexities, from what I saw is one of them is team collaboration. As I mentioned before, slicing your team vertically works really excuse me, works really good. So you need to map who's doing what, which team is responsible of this. What about the base application itself? Who's responsible of the base application? Who's responsible of updating the menu? All those kind of stuff that normally we don't think of. Really, you have to do this. And your team should collaborate. What about I want to change something in your libraries, guys? Then I'll submit a pull request to your repository, and then if you want to change something in my repository, you have to do the same thing. We have to go through the release cycle. We have to collaborate in a good way to be able to make everything to make sure that everything is going at the same time without any issue. Working on and working locally and debugging is really something very complicated. So if you really want to do micro-frontend in any way, iframes or non-iframes, you need really to think about what you're going to do about debugging and working locally, how to make the developer's life easier when it comes to debugging. Same thing when it comes to onboarding new developers. I already mentioned the story that we saw many people are struggling with onboarding into one product. You have to have a very defined way of how you will onboard your developers, because normally a micro front-end application is also a microservices application. So you need to be able to deploy everything locally. Then you need to deploy the whole application locally, including the front end and the back end. You need to have other components from online. For example, if you have one component hosted on npm, then you can read from the staging version of this component. So it's really a very long process of onboarding, and you have to document everything fine. You have to have a very good guide for new developers, especially fresh grads, because it will be a big struggle for them, because I see senior people are struggling. You need to have a really highly skilled team. I'm sorry to say that, but this is really true. To be able to build these frameworks and be able to build those good practices and so on, your team must be very good when it comes to the front end, and like you need to have a good team to be able to do this. So if your team really is not really willing to support, not very good when it comes to trying new stuff, and if you don't really have a good case, I don't think you should really onboard this. Also, something else, if you don't really have the scale that you need micro front end, then probably don't do it. If your applications are small, then like don't really waste your time, because it involves a lot of complexities. Something else which is important as well is management support. So don't go in silo and do everything yourself, because that will add a big overhead into the development time. So you need to buy an agreement from management first, so they would understand why initially, I'm just saying initially, the release or the feature that could take 2-3 days could end up maybe taking 2 weeks. So they really understand that there is a learning curve involved into this, and they really need to support this. So don't go by yourself doing this without agreement from the management, unless you're risking your job, maybe I would say.
With your team, maybe.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We're finished the Q&A.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a comment from what I can only I'm going to say nose ratio for the name, but integration testing must be fun. Do you want to just talk through how that process works, or because we're devs, we don't care, we've just thrown it at QA and see you later?
No. One of the portals was using unit testing and manual testing for integration. So there wasn't really end-to-end testing.
How'd that work out in terms of bugs in production or diagnosing bugs in production in general?
Yeah, so also I need to mention that this team was adapting web components recently. So I mean, it is not really their bad that there's a few things they didn't really do in the perfect way. It was just a learning experience as the team grows bigger and they're adapting new technology and so on. So there's a few things that didn't really work well out of the box. Like you don't really take things for granted. Like end-to-end testing, you would think that it will be easily, but sometimes it may not be going well because the breaking changes between the components. Somebody changes something, didn't update the test, and so I mean, so I don't want to say that they did this. I mean, they did bad things when it comes not handling end-to-end testing or something, but it is just like part of the learning experience. But they had manual tests. Right, just a unit test in your Angular stuff, and then somebody's doing manual testing on before sort of regression and testing the component itself.
Okay. Question from Gamer Glav. Basically wanting to know if you started from a monolith and then decomposed your way into the micro front and back ends, or if you started greenfield and started small and basically tried to put the little Lego pieces together.
Yep. So that's actually a very good question. No, so if I would do something, I think I would structure my code in the perfect way into a monolith. Then once I'm growing bigger, then I'll start to do the micro front ends. So that's what I would do. Why is that? Because I think it would take maybe years till you need really the complexity of micro front ends. Like you really need to have maybe 5-6 teams collaborating together and so on to be able to get the benefits of micro front end. So if your team maybe is 5, maybe 2, 3, 4 front end guys and everything, and you really want to do micro front ends, I think it's overkilling. So I would start with something a monolith that's really modular, because as you saw, I can actually in Angular, it is just like very easy for me to convert an Angular module into a custom element. So, and once everything is really structured, then I can import that into web components. It won't be a problem.
Ibi,
And do you have corona at the moment with the coughing? Sorry, James.
Yeah. How big was your dev team on the project, Ibi?
So in total, one team had around from 25 to 30, including Scrum Masters, BA, QA, testers, and so on. The Iframe team had also from around 20 to 25 developers, including the Scrum Master POs and the whole dev teams.
How many developers? Just developers? Developers.
I see what you did there.
No, I didn't do research on that, but majority are developers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have very less BA and QAs, so majority are devs.
Is the site live? Can we check it out in our inspection?
No, man, I'm not going to give you the website anyways. Even if
We could integration test it.
Probably, yeah, we can try. So I can't really expose that. But anyway, those are internal portals. So as I mentioned before, it is not a consumer portals.
So it's not a consumer portal. Why go for all the complexity in the first place?
No, because there was too many running streams at the same time. So for example, at the point of time, you want your maybe around 20 developers who's in the teams, split it into maybe 4 or 5 teams collaborating. Each one is working on a specific component. Plus, the main thing is they also wanted other people to contribute to the platform. So, for example, I can give you this tool or whatever framework. Then you can start contributing and just give me the code again, and I'm going to deploy it or like integrate with my CI/CD and do things for you. So this was the main reason they wanted everybody outside the organization to be able to contribute back to this portal, because it was a very critical portal to the business. And many people had a bottleneck because the dev team most of the time are working on doing something, like they have their own PI planning, their own tasks, and BAU definitely not enough for any people to create a new feature. So if somebody wants to create a new feature, they would tell him, okay, these are the documentation, go crazy.
Okay.
Any more questions from the audience?
I'm just having a look at the moment. Looks like we are good at the moment. So
Really?
do you want to kick into the next part? Yeah, man. Did good.
Cool. So
Apart from all that jQuery talk. That was...
Yeah. Okay. So if there is no more question, then guys, I have to say thank you. And if you really want to do micro front ends, please, you really need to know what you're doing. So you just don't do it for fun.
Oh, okay. Wait. We thought we were done. There was another question.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Francis wants to know how are the different microservices talking to each other? I assume we're talking about the new ones, not the iframe version.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. So there is in HTML and many in JavaScript now there is something called custom events. So those you can register custom events. So for example, I would say that what is my Yep. Okay. So for example, I would say that once somebody click on my Angular button on the UI, I can raise an event, and anybody who's interested from those components can actually register a listener on that event. So that's one way to communicate using events. The second way, if I have a parent component that passes data to a child component, they can do this by the using HTML properties. So I can have define a property, maybe like what we saw, called message. And once this message gets changed, I'll actually receive a callback function that this message has been received. So I can take this data and start doing my action. So this is the communication, parent-child communication or events.
Cool. All right. Hopefully that answered the yes. That did. Excellent. Francis says, okay, thumbs up, happy days. You are the man. Yeah. Okay, I might have elaborated a little bit on that, but
Cool.
So thank you very much for the talk. That was quite interesting, and yeah, thank you for the true life stories and the chat as well around when you want to do it and when maybe you don't want to do it as well. So
sure, my pleasure.
Keep in mind. So we do have the competition still. So I've got two questions. The first one is chuck up 2 benefits of using micro front ends. So first person to get the 2 benefits, at least, you do more if you want, is the winner for 1 license.
we're waiting for it.
Yeah, naturally.
3, 2, 1. Type fast.
2 benefits.
Well, yeah. Maybe they can't come up with 2.
I don't think you guys are taking this.
More complexity you get to justify iframes. No, that's only 1 each.
Yeah, you can't win from.
Sarah says scaling. She's got 1. That's a 0.5. Nose ratio's got a license already, so he doesn't care. Migraines and delays, no, that's not a benefit, dude.
But I don't think you mentioned delays, maybe.
Easy to manage. All right, scaling and easy to manage. That counts as 2 from Sarah.
Sarah, send me a message on Meetup, please, afterwards, and I'll send you through send me your email, actually, and I'll
awesome. What?
Yeah, for it. Okay, so Sarah's won the first one. So for the second question, okay, this one's pretty easy, so get your keyboards ready. What are the 2 technology options for doing the micro front ends? One's been mentioned very recently.
jQuery.
Been playing that. Have we got any serious players in this game?
I frame, you frame, we all frame 5 frames. Blazor, PHP compiled to WebAssembly, Aaron. React and Angular. James is waiting for something specific, apparently.
Yeah, I'm fishing for we spent about half of the talk. Okay, look, that's on the right track. On the right
Finally.
This will be yours.
I do love it when we descend into farce.
Come on, Ned Crowd.
Should I give them a hint?
All right. It's been mentioned 10 times. Maybe not quite as many times as jQuery, but almost. It starts with an I. Yeah, but now it's 2 different people. Oh no, but that's the winner.
Iframes and web components. There we go. We got 2 at once.
Okay, and Raphael, please send me a message with your email address on Meetup, and I'll send you through the license. Sour grapes. All right.
Oh, we love it.
Thank you, everyone, for staying at home tonight and watching us. Well, keeping us all safe. And we look forward to one day returning in person, maybe not too far away as restrictions are starting to ease a little bit. So thank you and good night.
All right. Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next month. As I should just mention very quickly in the channel thing in Twitch down the bottom, there's a little suggestion box if you want to talk for next month. Drop something in there. But apart from that, enjoy your nights. We're good.
You night.